Is this a legitimate tool or is it just a gimmick? And does it belong in the blacksmith shop? Well, today my curiosity has been satisfied. Now, if you've been hanging around a while, you know that I really like the induction forge technology. I think it's one of the coolest things to come into blacksmithing in quite some time. And a number of you have commented about the little handheld induction heaters that are really intended for use loosening rusted on nuts and bolts. So today I thought we would give one of those a try and see if it has any real application in day-to-day blacksmithing. Now, this unit was provided by K7s for me to test and review, but they are not paying for the video and they are not providing any input into this video. $110 volt, 1300 watt. I've not previously opened this, so you get to see it with me for the very first time. Not sure how that's really pronounced, KK7s or K7s or whatever. My apologies for pronouncing it wrong. Very small user manual. A number of coils, that's nice, different sizes. And a couple that you can bend yourself to suit your needs. But this is the whole unit right here. Now, like I say, this is intended for loosening rusted nuts and bolts so you don't have to get a torch out. And I'm sure it is very useful for that application. But does it have any application in a blacksmith shop? Unlike the big induction forge, this is not water cooled. This has a cooling fan. So the duty cycle is probably a lot smaller. This is not something you're going to use for forging it day in and day out. Although I do not see an actual duty cycle listed in the manual. I'm just guessing it should have a pretty short duty cycle. Here I've got a bolt with a rusted on nut. We'll see if this works for its intended use. I have changed to a smaller coil, so I've got a coil as close to this size as possible. I think that's important with any induction heater. The cooling fan on this comes on as soon as you plug it in, so that runs all the time, but there is a push button for controlling the heat. I'm doing this in real time so you can see how long it takes to heat that. Coming up to a red heat now. That's a pretty good heat there. I just got to get it hotter just to see what this does. And the coil is glowing red too, or the insulation on it is. That's expanded enough to not fit my wrench anymore, but turns right off now. Now, because this isn't liquid cool, I don't see any problem bending this coil to put it at a better angle for most of the work I would do. And it came with 2 of each size coil. So I think that'll be more useful for me. And I still have the other one that's the same size that I left straight. What would it do if we wanted to upset the end of a 3/8 bar? See how that's getting hot? Now there's no doubt a torch would be faster, but the open flame of a torch can be problematic sometimes. So you can put a little decorative head on something with this. Anyways, as I was saying, a torch can be a little bit problematic because it's an open flame, so depending on where you're working, that might be an issue. What about some controlled twisting? Still using that same coil I started with. Moving it back and forth just a little bit to get a little bit longer heat on here. Again, I'm still working at a 3/8 square bar. And I'm leaving this run. I'm not editing out any of the heating time, so you can see how long this really takes. Now, this is certainly slower than the big machine, slower than a torch, slower than a coal forge or a gas forge, but it is heating in a very controlled area, and there's some real advantage to that. This can create a very precise little reverse twist if you keep going with that. Now I do want to change coils on this, but because it isn't water cooled, these coils get really hot compared to what the other induction forge does. So I've got to let this sit, got to let it cool for probably 5-10 minutes. Then I can change coils, go to a bigger coil, and we'll try something in a little bit bigger bar. So I've switched to a larger coil, and we're going to work with a piece of 3/8 by 1 inch. This just barely fits. Just going to upset the end of this. I think that's a realistic use for this tool. I certainly wouldn't want to forge an entire bar heating it with this. It's kind of slow. But little detail things, if this is something you have in the shop and you don't want to light your coal forge or don't have a torch or something like that, this may still be faster for you. Starting to come up into a red heat. I don't know if this will ever get up to a forging temperature because it's a flat bar and it isn't filling the coil up well enough. It's always important on induction heating to be as close to the coil size as possible. But we did get a dull red heat out of it. So that is doable. I've just got a couple of scraps. Let's see how it does setting a rivet. This is the smallest coil that it comes with. Again, we'll heat this in real time. This is a 5/16 rivet, by the way. It'll probably actually heat faster on this second go around because now the head is a little bit bigger. Plus it's got more heat in it all left over. Now this does come with 4 made-up coils. There's a 15 millimeter or 0.59 inches, a 20 millimeter, 0.78 inches, 30 millimeter, 1.18 inches, 40 millimeter at 1.57 inches. Then it also comes with this long coil that you can bend. I think I might try and bend this into a taco coil type shape. Something vaguely similar to this one for the big induction forge. And I'll just see how that works. I'm not going to worry about that right now. That's for the future. I did bend some of these and they work just fine that way. And I think that for most of what I do, this is more useful to work this direction than it is to have the machine right on the end. Just depends on what you're doing with it. I will say that as this gets super hot, I did burn the outer insulation off because of the heat of the coil itself. If you burn enough of that off and these coils touch, they are going to short out, and that's not good. So you may need to just expand it just a little bit so that they don't touch. You'll notice I don't have any insulation on my big coils. I don't really worry about it, but it is nice if it's there. Is this a legitimate tool or is it just a gimmick? And does it belong in the blacksmith shop? Well, today my curiosity has been satisfied. Yes, I think this is a legitimate tool. It is probably ideally suited for the purpose that it was made, and that is loosening rusted on nuts and bolts, things like that. So if you're crawling around under a piece of equipment and you don't want to drag a torch, or it's not safe to use a torch, this might be a good tool for that. That's really what it was intended for. Does it have a place in the blacksmith shop? On a limited basis, I think it might. It wouldn't be bad if you're doing twists and you end up with a twist that isn't twisting up evenly and you need to heat a small section of it. This might be a good tool for doing that, especially if you don't already own a torch. If you already own a torch, maybe not. But this would do the job to just heat a small section. It was great for doing that reverse twist, other than it took quite a while to heat, but it left very precise, very predictable heat areas. So you get that reverse twist very even over a long period, if you're willing to spend the time that it takes to heat that. The other place this seemed to work pretty well is doing rivets. If you got to heat a bunch of rivets, and again, if you don't have a torch, this might be a good way to do spot heats on rivets, especially if it's a bigger piece that you can't get back to the fire. Sometimes you can heat the rivets in the fire, get them set in the piece. But if it's a big assembly and you're working on a big work table or on the floor somewhere, that's not really a convenient thing to do. And without a torch, this might be a good way to heat those rivets. You know, it might also be good if you're doing an on-site installation and you need to be able to heat rivets or the ends of tenons on the job site, and you're on somebody else's property and they may not want you using a torch, or maybe it's a big risk on the job site. This could be a solution to that problem. I don't see me using it a whole lot in my shop. I think it's going to have limited functionality, but I am going to keep it around because I think there is some use case for it, and occasionally it's going to be the right tool for the job. So again, I want to thank Case Evans for sending that out. No money changed hands. They just provided the tool so I could take a look at it. I will leave a link down in the video description if you're interested in buying one of these, and you can take a closer look online to see what they have to say about the tool. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it satisfied some of your curiosity on this tool, but I especially hope you have time in your day to get out to your shop, make something, have fun, but stay safe, wear your safety glasses. We'll see you for the next video.